People told me I was an idiot for saying that Damian Lillard will request a trade. The news leaked right before the Olympics. Of course he was going to deny it. Dame is not a look at me guy, and he didn't want Team USA to become a Dame trade circus. But Stephen A. Smith just said something that will shake the league.
If he were to want to get traded from Portland, and I'm not saying he does, but if he were to get traded from Portland, he would want to be a New York Knick because he believes in the New York market, unlike in Portland. It would be considerably easier for him to pull off getting guys to want and come play with him.
What? Instead of joining a super team, Dame wants to create a super team like KD and Kyrie did in Brooklyn. That would be huge for the NBA, but there is something a lot deeper than that Stephen A. Smith did not address. Yo, it's Casey. This is AM Hoops. AM Hoops Plus just went live, only taking new members August 2nd through the 6th, so that no one falls through the cracks. And so I'm not talking about it all the time here for people who aren't interested. But if you sign up, I promise the most fun you can possibly have as an NBA fan, especially if you don't live in the US. Now, I want to talk about the huge thing that Stephen A. Smith did not address. But first, let's look at what a trade for Dame would actually take for the Knicks. New York gets Damian Lillard. The Blazers get Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, Emmanuel Quickley, and 4 first-round picks. This deal guts the Knicks like the Carmelo Anthony trade in 2011. This package is a ton, yes, but it checks all the boxes for a superstar trade these days. An all-star in return? Check. Good young players? Check. A ton of first-round picks? Check. Now, some Knicks fans might hate this idea, but if Dame's plan of attracting other MVP-level stars to New York works, you'll be happy back in the finals. However, there is something else that Stephen A. Smith said that got my attention. Dame is not keen on demanding a trade. That's different than Dame won't demand a trade. It just means Dame doesn't like it. And we can see that every single time he is asked about a trade. I mean, Dame loves Portland. It's obvious he doesn't want to demand a trade. He said he wants to be the next Dirk Nowitzki, stay with one team and win one special chip. Kind of similar to what Giannis just did in Milwaukee. Dame is clearly bonded with the fans in Portland. I mean, it's refreshing to see a guy who feels the same way about the fans as the fans feel about him. That almost never happens in pro sports these days, but he might still demand a trade because he has to. This guy wants to win. They're leaving him no choice. The front office hasn't given Dame an all-star teammate since LaMarcus Aldridge in 2015. I mean, Dame seems like one of those really optimistic guys who believes in himself and his own team, but he's just been beaten down by loss after loss in the playoffs. Even when they made the conference finals, they weren't really competitive. If he wants to win, he has got to leave Portland, and it's killing him inside. We look at athletes like they're not real people and don't feel the same kind of pressure that we do. Well, Simone Biles just pulled out of the entire Olympics, basically, and she seems to be on top of the world. I mean, every time I see her in a commercial, she's smiling, but that's clearly not real life. Obviously, Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan, and most recently, Paul George, all admitted to having serious depression. So I wasn't surprised to hear Dame say this last week.
I've looked back at some of my experiences as a professional athlete, and, you know, when people describe the what depression looks like, or, you know, battling mental health issues, like what it looks like, sometimes I look back like, man, I had a couple of those moments. You know what I'm saying? I just didn't recognize that that's what was happening. So
that is what it's really like to be in Dame's position. I remember back in 2018, the Blazers were swept by the Pelicans in the first round. People hammered Dame on Twitter because he didn't play well. I guarantee he was reading that stuff. And even though it's smart to just say, oh, we'll just stay off social media, he's human. I mean, I even read all my comments, not getting a millionth of the hate as Dame, and it can get to me. And that's just for a playoff series with Dame. Now imagine what it would be like to leave a city that you genuinely love, and knowing that all those fans who have a special place in your life will turn on you. That pressure Dame talked about would be enormous. So Stephen A. Smith says Dame would prefer the Knicks, and that's great. But first, he'll have to make one of the toughest decisions of his life and demand a trade. That could put him in a deeper depression than anything he's ever experienced in the name of winning. And that takes a lot of courage. Now, I know some people out there in the comments too will say, who cares? He's a millionaire. Shut up and dribble, basically. Well, that's BS because we want access to these athletes 24/7. Dame's got 12 million social media followers on IG and Twitter. So we can't both pry into his day-to-day like that and expect him not to be a real person. And look, I want to admit that I am part of the problem sometimes. I mean, I do trade videos, just swapping guys everywhere like they're not real human beings. But I do have a line, okay? I used to cover high school sports on TV back in the day. I would never, ever call out a young player for making a mistake, especially if it costs his team the game. In fact, I would have all the highlights, and unless it was like I absolutely had to show it just to tell the end of the game, I would never show a young guy like that making a mistake. Because A, they're not professionals, so that's not fair to call them out. And B, they're just way too young to be able to handle that. I mean, it would take like something really, really, really special for that not to affect someone. But for pro athletes, it's different. I will call out guys for making mistakes like Ben Simmons in the playoffs this year, but I try never to say anything on the internet that I wouldn't say to their face. Like, I never make it personal. But what I'm about to say might be a little controversial. I recognize the courage that it would take for Dame to demand a trade, but I do think that mental health is similar to physical health in pro sports. If an athlete is so crippled by mental health they can't perform, it seriously hurts their value as an athlete. I mean, it's like Kristaps Porzingis can't stay healthy for the Mavericks. We call that injury prone, which hurts the team. Similarly, if a player consistently can't perform because of anxiety and depression, I feel for them, but it's just like being injury prone. It doesn't say anything about their character as a person, and I would hope they get all the help in the world, but I would not build my team around them. Now, that is not the case with Damian Lillard. Obviously, I would build my team around him. I think it was huge for him to acknowledge mental health in public like that, especially with trade demands going on. He might want to be a Knick, but it'll be a really tough decision to make. Now, if you want to see a story about a player who really overcame a lot, this is the underdog story of Torrey Craig. It's tragic, but it's also inspirational.